Hey, true believers. Chris Mack coming at you with Comic-topia After Dark. And have you ever had one of those movies that just sticks with you through your childhood and always brings back fond memories? Well, that was kind of the premise of what I wanted to go over today. We are going over The Great Outdoors. And this movie is so hilarious. Like, there's parts, yes, there's plot holes that we'll get into, but as a whole, it's just one of those movies that can be clean, fun for all ages, and still get a kick out of it with two powerhouse actors behind it, John Candy and Dan Aykroyd. So the movie itself, it follows the Ripleys. They're a family from Chicago who want to just enjoy a summer getaway vacation in Wisconsin. But it's ruined by their in-laws, the Craigs. So shenanigans incur while Chet does his best to restrain himself from killing his brother-in-law, Roman. Now, the movie itself was released by Universal Pictures in June of 1988. John Hughes was going to direct the film, but he was busy at the time with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, as well as she's having a baby. If you guys have not heard of John Hughes, he was kind of a powerhouse in the 80s. Some of his films, just off the top of my head, would be 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So whenever he got busy with the project, you know, like multiple projects, he would always hand them over to someone he trusted. So in this case, he handed over directing to Howard Deutsch. And they've worked together. Apparently, Deutsch did two of his other films, which is Pretty in Pink and Some Kind of Wonderful. Now, as I was saying, you know, Hughes was busy at the time with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and she's having a baby. Now, what I find interesting is each of these films reference one another with some sort of cameo. So, and when the movie She's Having a Baby, at the end, there's several different, you know, talents, like big names given Kevin Bacon and the actress, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, ideas on the baby's name. And then it comes to Dan Aykroyd and John Candy, and you can tell they are on the set of The Great Outdoors because they kind of have the what do you call it, the flannel going on, and they have the wood cabin behind them. And then in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, there's a scene where She's Having a Baby is on a TV. So I kind of like how John Hughes did world building. Now, back to the movie. It stars John Candy as Chet Ripley, Dan Aykroyd as Roman Craig, Stephanie Pharisee as Connie, Annette Bening as Kate, Chris Young, Lucy Dankins, Ian Giotti, and Robert Prosky. Now, as we stated, the movie is set in Wisconsin, but it was filmed at Bass Lake, California, near Yosemite National Park, which, here's a fun little tidbit. It's the same location where the opening of Star Trek V was filmed. Now, going back to the film, now that we've kind of got the preamble out of the way, the film does a wonderful job of portraying the Ripley family in the opening credits. There's no dialogue. You just see a down-to-earth family kind of driving a middle-class car, and they're singing yakety yak, don't come back. And they're having a wonderful time with one another. You know, that we don't need any extra help to understand what this family is about. This is a great way to do visual filmmaking. We know everything we need to know about the Ripleys. Now, with that said, speaking of visual filmmaking, the way they introduce Roman is equally well done. The music is a complete 180 from Yakety Yak. The car is more of a, you know, upper class, ritzy sports car, and we don't even see who's driving the car. We just see a hand on the wheel, and it gives this ominous feeling that something wicked this way comes. Now, speaking of character development, the location itself feels like a character with the wildlife and the mountains. It just gives off this grand feeling in terms of the scale and the scope of this place. And it makes you want to be there. You're just like, oh my God, this is somewhere I could actually retire. Now, the same can be said with the lodge itself. You know, the Ripleys enter, And even though it's supposed to be kind of a nice place, it has sort of that Texas Chainsaw Massacre feel to a degree. You see a gun lamp up on display. And then we are introduced to Wally and his wife and their dog. Oh, the dog. I'll let Wally here explain more about his dog.
Porcupine quills. Loves porcupines, hates people. She's in heat, too. Too bad you're not a dog.
Now, the cinematography with Roman, they use this really nice low-angle shot as the Craig's car pulls up into Perks Pine Lodge Resort. Say that 3 times fast. It just shows how large a life this character is. And Dan Aykroyd pulls it off as he and his family finally step out of the car and we're revealed this family.
What a gas. Chet's gonna shit a solid gold brick. What a great surprise.
Now, the playfulness of Chet and Connie throughout this film is fun. The ways that she can't relax until the cabin is clean from the previous occupants, while John Candy is just happy to be alone with his wife while the kids are out on the lake. And finally enters Roman. Now, as John Candy and Dan Aykroyd are finally sitting next to each other, these two powerhouse talents of the 80s, I love the expressions on John Candy's face. They are priceless. I mean, who can't empathize with wanting to take a vacation or a staycation and it's interrupted by parents or friends, and you're trying to keep that social grace about you, but all you could think is, get the hell away from me. And why this is happening, the juxtaposition of the two are definitely what makes this film work as a whole. John Candy is more of this blue-collar Joe, while Aykroyd is more of your corporate douchebag. And they play well off one another in this scene. You know, John Candy's like, look, this is a beautiful country. You know, this is what I see. And then Dan Aykroyd tells you, knows how to pull off a monologue. The first film I'd ever seen him in, because I was young at the time, was Ghostbusters. And again, he just does it so well here. He's in the zone. And while he's in this particular scene, me as a viewer, I become uncomfortable at what he sees God's country becoming. You're just like, oh boy. And John Candy expresses what the audience is thinking. You're just like, oh man.
I just see trees.
Now here we are introduced to the twins. I've seen this film countless times throughout my life. And to this day, I still cannot stand these two in this film. I know that's what the director and Hughes were going for, but man, do they know how to pull off aggravating. We'll talk more about, you know, why they irk my girt here in a bit. The dialogue in this film, it feels organic. A lot of modern movies, comics and whatnot, you'll read something and all it feels like they're doing is exposition dumping. And that's not the way to do it. What I mean is how Chet and Roman are sitting around the barbecue, you know, two guys kind of shooting the breeze, and Roman begins to talk business. And Candy actually gives some really good advice, because again, he's supposed to be sort of this salt of the earth type guy.
Easy money is money easily lost.
While Roman, on the other hand, he likes to invest big and get big investment back. You don't think much of it at the scene, you just kind of tune out a little bit, but the way how it's organic, it sets up for later. Just keep that in mind. Now, skipping ahead a bit, because I don't want to go, scene by scene, which I could. That's how much I enjoy this film. Everyone's settling in for the night.
Sorry, I think I have to tell you this story. A story that might save your lives.
The lighting, the deep shadows, the atmosphere immediately changes. The music. This begins to sound something like John Carpenter's Halloween. And as he's telling the story, again, visual storytelling, as John starts to talk about this bear that him and his wife saw on their honeymoon out here on this lake. And they cut from John Candy doing these big impersonations, and they showed the shadows cut back to the memory of the bear. And you start to feel the chills from this story, just like how his younger son begins to. You see him actually like visually gulp. Not many people in film, like modern film, I feel could tell a story like this. Candy is in total control. Everyone's hanging on his every word. Even when he does the mimicking of Freddy Krueger's hand, making everyone jump. The point of view shots of everyone's reactions really help intensify the story as Chet paces, it out by beat by beat. Now, the payoff at the end makes you both jump, like if you're a part of that campfire story, and it also makes you laugh too. It kind of breaks the tension. And it's just one of those scenes that I don't think could ever be recreated. And it makes you want to watch it and sort of memorize it. So if you ever go camping, you can see how old timers like covered wagon days were able to sit around and tell stories and make them engaging. This is on full display in this scene. Now, in this kind of time frame, the last thing from the scene I do want to reference is how Roman is sort of eavesdropping on Chet, tucking both of his kids in. And you realize, even though Roman loves his daughters, he's just so out of touch with them. He does try, which what I like here is, even though there's a lot of times where I've said this, where characters feel one-dimensional, here we see that Roman is this business, type A business guy, but he's not a complete tool. He loves his wife, he loves his kids, but he's just out of touch with them. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, I love how John Candy won't let his kids get away with not showing affection. He's sitting there with Buck, and he says, "Give me a hug." It's like, you're never too old to give your old man a hug. Or how the following scene, he's showing Ben how to ski. No matter how much his kid's getting annoyed, he's there for his kids. And that's what means the most. Now, before you kind of get this mushy feeling inside, this leads into one of the best gags in the film. John Candy on water skis. And, hats off to the stunt double who did this, because I would have easily just busted my ass. Getting back to the movie, this sort of circles back to why the twins piss me off.
I found your youngsters inside the mine perimeter.
What mine?
There's an old mica mine over on the other side of the property.
Now keep the mine in mind. Say that 3 times fast, because we'll circle back to this. Even though some of these scenes like this are sort of like, why? It's building. It's building. That makes sense. Now, here comes part of the problem. Now that I'm older, that I have the problems with this film. We're introduced to Cammy. I have a problem with her character because I feel like she was not fleshed out enough. When she first meets Buck, she comes off as a major bitch the night they meet. Now I can understand why she wants to kick his ass when she first sees him, but he tries to catch up with her and apologize, and she still gives him. However, he chases her down, kind of figures out where she works, and he wants to again apologize, and she goes, "I'm sorry, I was in a bad mood last night." Why? I mean, I can understand what Buck did that pissed her off, but if she was in a bad mood before that, we don't know. We don't know if she had a fight with someone or if her home life sucks. We don't know anything about this girl. I don't know if this was a directing choice to kind of show that, this summer love thing, and we're not, she's not this permanent fixture in Buck's life, so you don't want to get too attached to her. But again, storytelling, you don't need one-dimensional characters, because she goes from being this major bitch to her and Buck at the carnival making goo-goo eyes at one another. Now, also to a degree, it feels out of place. Like, it feels like Hughes was trying to put his trademark romance in there, which is fine, but it gets buried under the powerhouse talents of Candy and Aykroyd, who really dominate this film. And she doesn't come into play with any of the scenes. She's just sort of this side B plot that's kind of like, okay. Also, with the editing. So for example, 1 minute Buck's with Cammy, the next, which seems like only moments or maybe like an hour after, he's back with his family. As I said, I get this summer love and he's growing up, but I suppose it felt like their story could have been like a whole other film. Their relationship doesn't get a whole lot of breathing room, to extrapolate on. And another thing, see how we get Cammy and then like some funny scenes, and then Aykroyd and Candy are at a bar. And they're introduced to this character named Reg. And I don't understand what the whole point of him being introduced was for. He sits there, and then all of a sudden, Aykroyd's just like, I gotta go take a piss.
I gotta go to John and be right back. Gotta introduce Mr. Thick Dick to Mr. Urinal Cake.
Oh, jeez, Roman, you have to...
He's like in one other scene towards the end, and that's it. It's an interesting concept, but it doesn't drive the plot or really add anything to it. I mean, is he supposed to bring rain later into the movie? There's nothing here. Him and Cammy both were very one-dimensional characters that I don't understand why they were there, other than maybe for just as soundboards for the our main cast. Who knows? That's just my thought on it. Now we go from this B-plot summer romance and someone getting hit by lightning to the bat. Again, this is another gag scene, but oh, dude, Aykroyd and Candy crush it. The way they work off one another, but seeing them trying to dress up like American gladiators and take out this poor little, it's so damn funny. Like this is good slapstick. You don't really get a lot of good modern slapstick anymore. When it focuses on your main characters, these two powerhouse giants, the movie does what it's supposed to. It entertains you and you laugh. But going back to Reg and Cammy, it detracts. It doesn't add. So I don't know who kind of dropped the ball on that. It just kind of kills the momentum of the film. Now, the only scene where Cammy is directly affected by the family vacation is the scene with the old 96er. And boy, the way that this steak is introduced is effing spectacular. It feels like it becomes its own character, the way we're introduced to this delicious looking piece of beef and the way it's slapped on the table by the butcher. Now, I don't want to give too much away here, but as Candy tries to down the steak, you can't help but feel your own stomach churn a little bit, especially as he has to finish a certain part of this meal, and he's literally climbing Roman like a cat trying to get away from a bath, so to speak, and you just can feel his pain. Now, why does the 96er affect Cammy? Well, it has something to do with a promise that Buck made. Now, honestly, if this was cut from the movie, it really wouldn't have mattered. Because after this scene, she literally disappears for just about the rest of the entire movie until the end. And that's it! Her, Buck, Ben, a lot of these characters don't add a lot to this film. They just kind of stand around. And I don't know. They had all this talent to work with, but c'est la vie, I guess. Now, I've skipped some parts because if you haven't seen this film, I want you to see it. Here, this scene. All the guys go for an early morning fishing trip. Beautifully shot. However, after the hilarious gag ensues, and we get another moment with Buck chasing Cammy, the whole mood just changes. Like everyone's still kind of joking and seeming to get along. Now, I don't know if the rain's supposed to symbolize the tonal change or if something was cut here. I dug to see if I could find anything on it, but I guess maybe the director just realized they needed to start wrapping all this up, because all of a sudden everyone is uber shitty to one another, and it's kind of the all is lost moment. Now, I don't really want to go over this. I mean, everyone's fighting, but there's one moment of brilliance in this scene.
Thanks for ruining my vacation, Ripley.
What was that?
Chet has had enough, and there's a close-up of him snapping a match. Now, that just shows how he's feeling inside with Roman's shit. And now it's just one of those things, again, I was talking about at the beginning with visual storytelling. Now, I'm not going to go back in any more detail in this scene. Needless to say, here is where we circle back as to why the twins annoy the piss out of me. During this whole catharsis moment, everyone asks, where's the twins? It's raining cats and dogs outside. And guess where they go? Back to the effing mine. It's kind of like, Mom, Dad, watch your child. Seriously. It does add, once we kind of finally get the two little turds out of the way, there is some great moments with Chet and the bear.
Big Bear, chase me!
The film does do a decent job of getting things wrapped up nice and neat. You do see how the gun lamp's explained, and Cammy's whisked away, and everyone is happy again. Kinda. And what do I mean by kinda? This is where, again, you're gonna have to watch the film. The last little note here, if you want to know what the bear's name is, make sure to watch till after the credits. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So, The Great Outdoors. Is it a movie masterpiece? No. Does it have problems? Oh, yes, sir, it does. But if you're nostalgic for good 80s comedy, I highly recommend this film. Also, if you have kids like I do, and you want to watch some good family-friendly films that are relatively harmless, that still have some good points in them, this is one of those films. Compared to, modern day quote-unquote family films where you feel like you need to take about 4 or 5 flasks with you to go see some of these animated movies. Ugh. Yeah, the 80s was definitely a time and the early 90s was definitely a time where you could sit down with your kids and everybody could really enjoy what you're watching. The Great Outdoors has 2 memorable powerhouse comedy talents. And when they're on screen, they do exactly what they're supposed to and do a great job at it. So The Great Outdoors, it has its problems, but it's definitely worth the watching. If you can find a copy, I recommend picking it up. I saw it in a bargain bin. I went, yes, that's mine, because I've been looking for a copy of it for eons. Now, with all that said, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this movie. If you have, please make sure to go out and pick it up from wherever you can nowadays, since video stores are sort of few and far between. And if you've enjoyed this review, we really would appreciate it if you take a moment to hit like, share, and subscribe. Really helps this channel out more than you could possibly know. And if you wouldn't mind hitting that fancy little cinema bell next to subscribe, that way as we continue to upload content, you guys can come to the channel. And we love talking with y'all and hearing your thoughts and feedback. You know, and if we missed anything in the movie, want to hear it, down in the comment section. Comments, not comic. And also on our social media pages, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, I hope y'all continue to have an absolutely amazing evening watching movies. And remember, yakety yak.
Don't go, guys.
Just finish